Great. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Becky, and I'm the Chief Executive of the English Association, and I'm so pleased to be hosting you all this evening. A quick bit about the EA before I hand you over. So the EA is a learner society and a subject association, which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and defend the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education, from primary and early years through secondary and further to higher education and beyond. And we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to our speakers for joining us this evening. And thank you to you as well. Our members make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you'd like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs just £53 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you get access to a whole range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. Right, that was my spiel. So it's now my pleasure to hand you over to Suzanne Joynson, who will be in charge this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky. Hello, hello, everybody. It's really good to see such a large number of people coming tonight. So my name's Susie Joynson. I am Reader in Creative Writing at the University of Chichester, and I'm also a writer. Today we've got a panel of speakers that span from the higher education committees of the English Association and also the National Association of Writers in Education. Now, I'm sure that most of you here have heard of both of these wonderful institutions. We felt that it's a good time to pause and recalibrate and chat and think. We're just about to launch into a new ref period, as we all know. The last few years have been complex in terms of the academic world and beyond. We're thinking about how the disciplines of English and creative writing have so much shared history and so much and benefit so incredibly hugely from working together and working in tandem. So the idea of this evening was to kind of start a conversation, or continue a conversation perhaps, between interested parties. I'm going to ask the speakers to speak for 5 minutes each, and I think in order to kind of manage questions and discussions, I'll move through each speaker and very strictly stick to 5 minutes, and then we'll have discussions. So if you've got questions brewing for each individual person or whatever, make a note of them to yourself perhaps, and then we can bring them to a full table together. I want to start very briefly just by saying that for me personally, you know, the teaching, reading, close reading and understanding of critical texts is so fundamental to being a writer that the two things are just so completely deeply embedded. I'm really excited about thinking about ways that we can really practically work together. I'd like you to think of 3 sort of general points perhaps that we can come back to at the end, and one is the implications for the two disciplines in terms of the new ref era that we're entering. The second is any kind of synergies between the two disciplines in terms of the academic frameworks of benchmarking and all of that. And then the third is a very practical, like how could we continue the conversation, what steps forward, any action points. So it'd be really good if you could bear those 3 elements in mind. And I'm going to stop very promptly at 5:45, but I will make sure everybody's got my email in case you want to get in touch. So hopefully that's okay. Any very quick questions or anything I need to answer before we get going? Seems okay? Yeah. Okay, so I thought I would start with Frances, and what I'm going to do is, rather than introduce everybody, I will just ask each speaker to introduce themselves at the beginning, and we'll move through that way. So Frances, would you be okay to
sure.
share your thoughts? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're just going to load a PowerPoint if that's possible. Yeah, so just wanted to give a quick talk about English crossovers. I found the metaphor of the car park actually quite appropriate here, with the two sort of different cars of creative writing and English sort of meeting each other in the car park, twinning up in this photo. And as you'll see, there's obviously a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of different colors and shapes involved in it here. And I quite like the kind of metaphor of the car park here. I think we are sort of parked in institutional structures, which you can see in visualized, in the kind of the neat lines. And so but equally there is that kind of messiness of people not parking correctly. And I think that's relevant too. Just move on to the next slide. Thank you. So I think one thing that Norway has really wanted to do, and I think our conferences over the last few years have really celebrated the democratization of creative writing. And I think we share this with, certainly knowing Bob's wonderful sort of research, and he'll talk later, there is a sense of like wanting to democratize English literature, decolonize it in certain senses. And I guess it's led to a kind of much more sort of opening out of the purposes of creative writing, which perhaps is also happening in English studies. There's an emphasis that is decried and hated by some of creative writing and therapy, the kind of healing aspects of creative writing, but certainly there's a really big research base around this. Creative writing is a form of exploration, a form of, I think this is really important in creative writing courses, of vending. You're selling your text, you're wanting to sell your text to a publisher, to get an agent, and to be marketed in the world. And I think that's an emphasis. And there's connecting with other texts. I think, Susie's talked so much about the vital importance of being a critical reader if you're going to be a decent writer. Activism has increasingly come into focus. We're living in a time of huge political and environmental crisis, some might say, and increasingly young people that we're teaching want to use creative writing, use literature to try and change the world. And finally, I would say, I think all of us are in the learning game, aren't we? We're really wanting to promote that. If you're interested more in that, my article there talks a bit more. Just next slide. And I suppose a really fascinating but little known area is creative writing and research. And I think this is where perhaps, it'd be interesting to have this conversation with the English people, that we do perhaps differ a little bit. I know certainly within Norway, we're certainly seeing sort of social scientists using things like action research to use creative writing to, as we were talking about, improve situations in local communities. So, for example, cleaners are writing about the kind of appalling conditions that they might endure in their jobs, and using that to sort of mobilize change and give information to people about things. Autoethnography, a classic sort of social scientist technique of ethnography, researching things in the field, is increasingly being used by creative writers to explore in depth, way beyond sort of autobiographical writing, what's happening. And then this whole idea of creative writing as a form of research in itself, practice research itself, and there's a lot of theorizing around that. And again, Vicky McElroy, my colleague, and I have written about this, so you can read more. So I just wanted to open the conversation, really, just a series of provocations, and noticing kind of the synergies, but also perhaps some differences with things. Yeah, Susie, I mean, I know that you just wanted a brief talk, so I might end it there, unless you feel I've missed anything.
No, that's fine. Thank you. That's really interesting. Series of provocations, as you say, for everybody to kick us off. So I'm sure we'll all have lots to say in response to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we move on to Kate, if that's all right?
Yeah, thanks, Susie, and thanks, Francis, for starting us off. Thanks for the invitation to be here. It's really lovely. And I'll just introduce myself first. So I'm Kate North. I'm reader in creative writing at Cardiff Metropolitan University, and I'm also principal co-editor of Writing in Practice alongside Francis, which is Narway's journal, creative writing journal. So I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm just going to make a few brief points, and I'm going to start off talking a little bit about the changes that we're aware of so far for Ref 29, and some things that I think are interesting, and the colleagues I've spoken to have found quite interesting. Of course, you know, there's still much to be decided, but one interesting thing relates to the reduction of reliance or requirements for impact case studies, and that seems to be happening. And I mean, this is a bit of a sweeping statement, of course, but as writers and readers and people who are often largely focused on the production of texts, although not exclusively, this might be seen as quite welcome to some people, or to smaller teams perhaps, who have found pressures to sort of cover that remit of more than one impact case study. So that's something that people I've spoken to has viewed as quite exciting, really. And similarly, the break in the link between individual staff members and unit submissions, along with removing the minimum and maximum outputs for specific individuals, these feel like quite freeing things, or that potentially there's an opening up with the next ref that could be quite welcome. And then thinking about our inextricably interlinked disciplines, as has already been described, and in relation to QAA benchmarking, I prior to this talk, I was having a flip through the benchmarking statements, and I noticed in the English statements, there's, you know, a really sort of solid declaration about being a shape subject, part of the social sciences and humanities and the arts for people and the economy. And in the creative writing statements, there's quite a lot of focus on creative writing being something that's inherently interdisciplinary often, and the fact that creative projects are often implicitly hybrid in conception. And I kind of see that description alongside the shapeness of English and of creative writing, sort of embodying that interlinkedness that Susie mentioned at the start of this session. And that just makes me think about the obvious opportunities there are for us to work together on REF going forward, specifically in relation to impact case studies, perhaps, but in other areas as well, around environment and outputs. And then I was just going to close, because this is a brief thing, so I'm just going to close with some final thoughts around how we can potentially work together as disciplines. And certainly when looking at some of the case studies from the last REF, one of the things that struck me about things that appeared to be quite successful collaborations were projects and activities that worked on public engagement or public understanding around particular issues or places or spaces or themes from the sort of literary, critical and creative perspectives. And I think that's something we naturally do, and I think it's something that people can continue to focus on. Frances already mentioned action research, and you know the engagement of creative writers in action research really often comes from the understanding of writing practice as a research method in and of itself, as an exploratory act. And I think that there's lots of sort of room there to forge good connections. And in a similar vein, with regard to participatory research and what Frances was saying about the democratization of things and the decolonization of texts and understanding, certainly I think creative writing and English can do a lot there around participatory work. And I'll leave it there because I'm sure yeah, everyone else has much more to say.
Thank you. Thank you. That's brilliant. I've got loads to say in response to that, but I'm going to hold it back for a second. Really, I really like that. Anyway, I'm going to withdraw and hold it in. Thank you, Kate. We will come back, I'm sure. Jenny, is Jenny here, Becky, or not?
No, she's not. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. We'll bump her to the end. She may come, she may not. And we're also waiting for Doug, I think. So Bob, over to you, if that's all right.
Doug's here.
Yeah.
Sure, but I'm happy to speak next. So I'm going to say, I haven't got a PowerPoint. I'm going to say 5 things under 5 paragraphs. And the first is a kind of personal thing, which is that I work in a department in which the creative writers and the English people work really closely together. We sometimes teach each other on each other's courses and so on. And it's been one of the absolute joys of my career to work so closely with creative writers and to watch the discipline or disciplines change and develop and kind of cross-fertilize themselves. And I know that my own work has changed because hanging out with novelists and poets, and it's been a really fantastic, enlivening experience. And I think that one of the things we have to see is the huge change to, I want to say, English and creative writing as one kind of disciplinary conglomeration that this huge explosion in creative writing in the academy has done. And it's been really, really positive in all sorts of ways. And it's just, I'm so kind of in favor of it. So that's my first point. My second point is about, so I talk about research, teaching, kind of skills and recruitment, and I'll say something at the end in relation to what Kate said about the QCA benchmarking statement. So my second thing is about the research, and just to echo what Frances and Kate have already said, and what you said, Susie, at the beginning, which is what we do from 4 steps away is the same kind of thing. It's about making meaning with words, it's about thinking about understanding, it's about writing, it's about creating, and deep down we all kind of know that. But of course, my second point about research is we're all trapped in Frances's car parks in the those institutional statements. And you talked a lot about REF, and Jenny perhaps will talk about that too when she comes. And like her, I was a REF panelist. There were creative writers on the REF panel, and we had really great, clear guidance about reading creative work and understanding it and responding to it. And of course, creative work, I mean, some of the creative work we read is novels, which is kind of like my day job, and some is, you know, much more exciting. Different novels are more exciting than anything. Okay, but different sorts of creative practice that are challenging and different. So the ref panel at the last one, and I'm sure it'll be true going forward, have a really profound understanding of the research in practice and the difficulties and the challenges and those sorts of things. So I'd want to think that that was now something that we were kind of really solid with, if that makes sense. And I also echo your point about the impact case studies and about the environment statements. So I mean, I think that seems to me to be a really important change that's happened in English and creative writing, that we're now really kind of happy moving along together as a disciplinary conglomeration, one or two disciplines. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say was about pedagogy. Now, one of the things that a really great critic who's retired now, Ben Knight, says in some articles in his book, Pedagogical Criticism, he says that we think of the discipline of English and maybe of creative writing as kind of arguments that go on in learned journals, or, you know, at conferences when the famous professors from Harvard and Yale duke it out over historicism or something. But in fact, what actually shapes our disciplines much, much more is the pedagogy. So our disciplines are shaped, he says, in the conversations of the corridor and the classroom, just as much as in the learned journal or scholarly monograph or novel or poem. And that's incidentally why I think like things like Nawe and so on are so important. It's they, in addition to the practice, they're also thinking about the pedagogy. And one of the things that I've learned as a working with creative writers is that there is really fantastic pedagogy in creative writing, partially because it's new, partially because it's so creative, partially because you're doing such interesting things with such interesting students. There's so many new, interesting pedagogical ideas. Some, of course, are developed out of English. Some are completely new. Some come, as Kate said earlier on, from all the different disciplines that shape creative writing. And it seems to me one of the key synergies is for scholars like me in English to take things from creative writing, to use them in our own pedagogy. And that's the way we kind of, the discipline of English and creative writing kind of cross-fertilize each other. And I go one step further, but I won't say very much about it. I think some of the contemporary challenges, like AI and so on, are really well met by pedagogies developed in and used by creative writers that can sweep across the disciplinary conglomerations. Okay, so my fourth paragraph of 5, Jenny, I see you've just arrived. My fourth paragraph is about kind of skills or attributes or whatever we call them. And this again is to take kind of 4 steps to see English and creative writing as part of the same disciplinary conglomeration. We know that our disciplines, broadly understood, are under attack, but we also know that we provide an astonishing range of skills and graduates for crucial bits of British industry, the creative economy. It's booming. It's going to have much more money over the next 10 years, many, many more jobs. And our graduates, English and creative writing, through the way we teach them, through research and practice they do, have these core skills that are really vital. The skills, here's my list of my 4 C's that everyone is bored of hearing. Okay, creative skills, creative problem solving, which means being able to write a sonnet is the same kind of creative problem solving as working out how to move pallets from Doncaster to London. Critical skills, thinking around things, analyze things, as Susie said at the beginning. Obviously, communication. But communication is talking, listening, writing, responding, and collaboration. Okay, so I know it seems weird sometimes if you're writing a novel by yourself in your garret, but of course, the pedagogy of creative writing is all about collaboration, teaching people to collaborate, and so is the pedagogy in English. So these crucial skills, okay, are baked into what we do, and we have to be really kind of, it's great to teach novels or teach people to read or understand or write sonnets, but we bake in these skills into what we do, and it's really important to share them and tell people that we're doing them. And the final thing I wanted to say is to respond to Kate about the QAA. Yeah, I was very keen on the shape So SHAPE is an idea from the British Academy to balance with STEM. So STEM is technology, maths, and engineering, and SHAPE is exactly as Katie said, is humanities, arts, and people, education, and the economy. It's not supposed to be a battle; it's supposed to be a kind of balancing. And of course, some people are a bit antsy about the names. Of course, they are, and obviously, people in our neck of the woods feel antsy about flags being held up for us. But in this rather difficult time, better to have a flag you're antsy about than no flag at all. And so I think we were very keen on the QAA to build that through and to make sure that the English literature, language, and creative writing benchmarking statement was as inclusive as possible for this conglomeration of disciplines. Now, I know creative writing has got its own benchmarking statement, and I applaud that. That's really great. The more people know about what they're doing and what the state of the field is, the better. But I also want to make sure that we feel that we know that we're working together for all the reasons that I've said and the previous speakers have said, as disciplines moving together, not in a hierarchical, controlled way, but in a supportive, I'm going to say conglomeration again, because it's supportive conglomeration. Okay, thanks so much. I just echoed what other people have said. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bob. Yeah, shared pedagogy, and I keep having an image of some kind of Venn diagram or sort of circles crossing over in some way, as opposed to attention and competing with each other, so anyway, that's very interesting. Thank you. So Douglas, I think you've arrived. So we're running Hi, Douglas.
Oh, I'll be fast.
Yeah, we're slightly over time, so fast as you can, but also giving you space.
I know. That's possible, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a physics forum. I'm going to be really quick. So my name's Doug Cowie. I teach creative writing and American literature at Royal Holloway with Bob. What I'm going to say is going to pick up on some of the things or address some of the things that he raised, which is not by design. I promise, believe us or not, but I suppose it is partly a product of the fact that of what Bob said at the beginning of what he said about the ways in which we work together as a department at Royal Holloway, and I'm sure other people do as well. No, I don't mean that we're special. Obviously we are, but I don't mean that. I don't think what I'm going to say is particularly novel. I do think it's important. It's about pedagogy. And it's about this idea that we don't treat English and creative writing necessarily as separate things. There's obviously arguments that can be had about that in some other forum, but not this one today, or if you want to, fine, but that's for later. I think it's important that they're kind of part of the same discipline. It matters a lot to me, which is why I teach literature and creative writing and not just one or the other. And what I want to address with respect to pedagogy is student writing, because I think that's kind of obvious for someone who's a creative writer to think that writing is the most important part of a literature degree. And it's something that my colleagues and I'm sure lots of you talk about with your colleagues, is how bad students are at writing essays. They're really bad at it. And we complain about it a lot, especially at during the marking seasons. And why can't they just do this? And why can't it I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And when we talk about, when Bob mentioned earlier about oh, there's these shared pedagogies we can talk about. And then sometimes in our department, I'll be well, there's, here's an idea. And then I was oh, but that's creative writing and it's different. And as much as we want them to be part of English and creative writing to be part of a similar conversation, we end up pushing them away from each other again. And so I think the issue with bad writing is one. And I think that students are bad at writing because they're not confident about writing. They turn to things like plagiarism and AI and whatever else is on the horizon because they're not confident and they're scared and they want to get a good grade and they don't know what to do and they panic and whatever. Some of them are just deceitful, but those are always going to be deceitful. So who cares? Just let them be deceitful. It's the other ones that I'm more interested in. And I think a lot of this badness comes because the model is often bad. I think I don't, maybe it varies from place to place, but at Royal Holloway, we have a moment where we issue them some questions for their essays, towards the end of term. And we tell them if they want to bring us a plan, we can look at their plan. And then we send them off and we sit back and wait for them to produce a result. And then we write some feedback on that result, and we judge the result with a grade. And they look at that feedback or don't. And some of them come in, like, you have one or two of them who are keen and probably got a first anyway, come and talk to you about how they can get better. And you're like, you're already good enough. So, like, you know, go away. And the bad ones never come because they're too embarrassed or scared or all these other things. And so, like, that model is bad, and it leads them to bad writing. And like, creative writing, I think, offers a really helpful answer to that. And it's not even that hard. I think it's hard to get confident and find a structure to do it in. But like, we workshop stuff in creative writing. Like, you know, the students bring their work in and they work on it, and they get feedback from each other, and they get feedback from us, the like so-called experts, and they go away and work on it and make that thing better, and then they hand it in. And like, they don't cheat in the same way that they cheat on literature essays, and they feel a better sense of ownership over it. And there's lots of other reasons for that. I'm not suggesting that what I'm saying is like some panacea or something, but like, but that's that issue of ownership over it and of working on it together and collaborating, as Bob said earlier, is really important. So like, the answer, I think, is to start thinking about essays as things that are part of a learning process that is not an exam on like some cold thing that like prove us that you did something, but rather it's part of the process of learning. And so it's integrated into the literature seminar in the same way that it's integrated into a creative writing workshop. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. I got so sick of trying to like convince people this is a good idea that I just like did it myself this year. And one of my classes, like, so the trade-off is I can't teach 1 million novels, which is like always my goal, is like everyone should read a 1,000-page novel every week, and like they'll be better people as a result. And like, I've now like reluctantly come to the conclusion that that's not the case. And so we're doing fewer novels, but spending more time with students submitting drafts of essays of their own ideas. I haven't set them any questions yet. Just like, what interests you in this novel? Write something. And everyone in class is talking about it every week. And so every student gets one chance in my class. And it's been really kind of interesting and amazing how students have responded to that. And I could talk about it more some other time, but I'll leave it there because that was almost exactly 5 minutes. Done.
Brilliant. Thank you. I desperately want to hear more about that. I've been rethinking my creative writing workshops as well. So less about slashing, cutting, editing, and having a space of time to grow before you even begin the editorial process. It's like sort of connected to what you're saying. But anyway, okay, thank you. So we've got time for Jenny, but just maybe slightly shorter than 5 minutes if it's possible. Is Jenny there?
I am here, and I want to apologize for arriving late. I just got the timing wrong, but yes, I'll keep it short. So I have got a slightly different perspective, and I want to start by telling you that this morning I'm in a new institution, Cambridge University. I received a survey about strategic priorities for the future of English, and on that survey was a question I think you'll be very pleased to hear about, and I quote: "One of the trends in our faculty and or other institutions has been a growing interconnection between critical and creative writing in both teaching and research. Do we want to promote this interconnection more, and if so, how?" Now, the timing couldn't be better, because this, I think, is our question today. And I'd like to suggest it's not a question only for my colleagues at Cambridge or my friends at my previous institution, Newcastle University, but it's one for everyone in creative writing and English literature today, as we think together about our future and the future and value of humanities and arts. And I'm picking up on things that Bob has said, as these two areas drift apart slightly, with our funders. We might pick that up a bit later. But in the brief time I have, probably about 2 minutes, I'm guessing, I want to think a very little bit about that interconnection and how and why we might want to promote it. That we should want to promote it is an absolute no-brainer for me, given that so many creative writers have a literature background and vice versa. Well, I'm very interested that so many literary scholars might now describe themselves as non-fiction writers. That's a whole new genre of academic writing I think we need to explore and understand better. But we haven't always been interconnected, have we? Hence the value of the question that my colleagues are asking. We've been proximate to each other. I mean, how many of us have you worked along corridors with literary scholars and creative writers cheek by jowl? And I have had lots of really good experiences with my creative writing colleagues at Newcastle, but I have no time to tell you about that now. But one of the things I've done lots of work with creative writers is teaching and supervising, especially supervising PhDs that have a critical and creative component to them. But I don't think we've set aside much time to think together about how we work together or have worked together, or how deeply understanding how our complementary but different approaches might benefit each of us. We just did the work. But I think that now, and this event is a provocation to that, I think it is time to do that, to do a bit more than just doing, and step back and reflect on what we have done together and learn from each other over several decades now, so that we can think forward. So I really want to sort of foreground that as the connection as a way of going forward. And a really crucial connecting point for me right now, this is really what I want to say, is how our stories might tell a powerful our subjects might tell a powerful story together about the undervalued quality of critical creative or creative and critical thinking in the humanities. And at the very least, we need to explain the value of explain and value creativity in critical thinking and the critical element that has always been integral to creative practice. So the two are intertwined. Maybe we've been too close to really bring that together. But I think that is already happening. And here I have to say something about the brilliant work of colleagues in English at Oxford Brookes, including Catherine Craig, who I see is on this Zoom call, a literary scholar and poet and librettist who is pioneering new ways of thinking beyond criticism. I can put that the link in the chat. Or my erstwhile colleague, Emma Whitday at Newcastle University, who is exploring the role of practice as research as an approach to early modern drama. So she's using practical performance techniques to explore the possibilities of staging neglected early modern plays and to understand lost plays and voices today, and alongside that, to enhance her practice as a creative writer of drama. Now, I think that there are probably many colleagues around the UK doing work like that. There are other Katie Crates and other Emma Whitdays, and I think it's time to gather their stories and hear from them. I'd like to propose that we do that.
Wonderful.
That's quick enough for you.
That was very quick and very very succinct. Thank you, Jenny. Okay, that's perfect. We've ended our individual talks exactly where I wanted to. So words like interconnected, shared, intertwined, etc., the inherent creativity within critical scholarship and the inherent critical thinking within creativity seems to be the flowing theme. So I want to open up to questions. I was hoping if we could just start with responding to the individual, if we've got questions that are directed to any of the speakers to start with, and then we can move into something more general. Would that be a way forward, I think? So perhaps you could, does anybody have a question that they would like to have a look at the view here? Does anybody want to jump in with a question or a comment or a response?
Yeah, I suppose I was quite interested in this sort of possibly exploring some of the tensions between creative writing and English. I think Doug and Bob I think Bob was making a very convincing case for the kind of synergies between the two, but I think Doug was touching upon some of the kind of some of the analytical sort of stances that English can take, can militate against the creative process, and I think that can be an issue. I don't know what people, between the two subjects, and I would say that in my own case, sort of, I've found quite a lot of synergies as well, not only with English, but also with the social sciences, as I mentioned, with autoethnography and action research, which is very much kind of in the educational field, and I don't think would really be embraced by a kind of English specialist. So just sort of thinking that creative writing for me has a quite a wide remit, and so I think it can be not always a problem if it's kind of pinned to English. A provocation again.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have a response or want to speak?
I was thinking about strategies of assessment, actually, in reaction to what Douglas was saying. I mean, the classical model in English literary discourse is that the student writes and the teacher assesses. Whereas in creative writing, it's much more collaborative. And we search out and we invite mutual assessment between students. I mean, we present a piece of work and we ask the students as a group what they think of it. And I'm wondering if the people in literary study can learn a bit from that.
I might respond to that, Robert. I think that we are learning from those techniques and those practices. There's a great deal of experimentation. There might be more, actually. I mean, I'm thinking in my old institution, creative writing could be part of a critical response. Writing of all kinds. Doesn't need to be creative fiction, but we encourage people to really experiment, and I think there could be a lot more crossover.
I'm just going to second that. I think about kind of peer assessment and so on. I mean, in our institution, we have an English course in which they make podcasts, which are kind of assessed by the student bodies, and it's like a creative writing workshop. So I absolutely agree. There's lots of things.
I'm just going to jump in there as well, because just to I guess maybe expand a little on what I was saying earlier. It's not just about doing creative stuff in a more traditionally literary classroom. I was talking about this with one of my colleagues today, because I'm not against that either. Don't get me wrong. There's reasons why some people might not want to do that, might not be confident doing that kind of thing, might not feel they have the experience. Those are all things, obviously, that can be worked on and developed by an individual teacher, practitioner, whatever. But also, I don't want to give up on the literary analysis essay as a thing that we do in literature studies. But what I think part of my point is exactly, and maybe this is sort of echoing what Robert was just saying, but that you bring some of the approach to the approach that I take to fiction writing, and take that same approach and get students enthusiastic about that approach to literary analysis, as writing a paper doesn't need to be this daunting semi-punitive thing. It could be a creative thing, and take ownership of they can be encouraged to take ownership of their writing in that process. And it doesn't need to be, nothing needs to be reinvented to do that, except for a shift in approach and classroom pedagogy, which I think is the thing that matters the most to me. I'm slightly just repeating what I said, but I think it's worth adding that back into the conversation.
Yeah, I think we sometimes have practices that we've got quite entrenched in, and actually, probably as Jenny was just saying, we can actually completely rethink them, can't we? We can rethink how we assess and mark, and we can rethink how we do creative writing workshops, and we can rethink how we articulate scholarly work as a completely creative activity. Yeah. So Ellie, and then I'll come to Jenny.
So I think Jenny might have been first, actually, so I don't mind. Sure, and very sorry for not putting my camera on. I've been for a run and nobody needs to see me right now. It's really, really interesting. We've been having this discussion loads and loads, and I think I come from the critical perspective, and I think probably like many people were a little bit skeptical about kind of creative critical and how that works. And I think it's trying to understand that each student, there's a couple of things. I think each student, depending on what their natural discipline or their chosen discipline is, tends to come with a different set of or lack of confidences. My experience is that creative writing students really making us think, like I said, about how we bring the creative critical aspects into classrooms. And as an example, for instance, I've just been in a review for a PhD student who comes from the creative background and is doing a creative critical PhD. And what came out of the review was a discussion, really, not that she wasn't engaging with critical ideas and she'd read an incredible amount of theory and ideas, was simply the confidence to think about her creative work as something that can respond critically to these ideas. So they were working kind of alongside each other, where she was sort of using the theory as inspiration for her art and her writing, but not thinking in a way that, actually, my art and my writing can actually also respond to the gaps that I see in this criticism. It can fill that area that I believe that this theory is not speaking to. For her, it was about working class womanhood, for instance. So she was using it to inspire all of these really exciting ideas, and we could kind of see them running alongside, but she wasn't quite making those connections. And I think there are these areas where we can have these discussions with our students, and I think it is a little bit bespoke and individual. I think that's maybe what we're kind of also grappling with a little bit here, is that there is no kind of one way that fits all students. You know, here's how you write an essay, and here's how you structure it, and here's how you do a good introduction. It's not the type of conversations we should be having about the new work and the new interesting work that's being produced by students that want to do this work. I do, however, want to just also underscore another issue that we have found. One, I don't want to harp on about reading, but I do think reading is something where we need to kind of engage again how we kind of encourage students to write creative writing from beyond their own experience, which is always going to be limited, and start thinking about how you write from different perspectives, you know, explore different histories of writing and all of that type of thing. The other thing I wanted to say, sorry if I'm warbling on, is about the assessment and marking and things like this, maybe from a slightly different angle of, again, the PhD. One of the issues we're having with proposals for PhD is how to, is it in the process of the discussion of whether or not we accept certain proposals, is there is often sometimes stronger critical work and weaker creative writing work, or the other way round. So we're having creative critical proposals put in, and we think, oh, in a way, if only they just handed in a critical piece, we could accept them, or a creative piece. How do we address the initial acceptance of them with the hope that they can bring the others up to scratch? So, you know, maybe sort of slightly different, but that's just an issue I've noticed we've been having. And I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, thank you, because people do tend to stake a claim in one or the other, don't they, and then have less confidence on the other side. Yeah, thank you. Really, really useful points, Ellie. Jenny.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to draw attention to the brilliant things that are being said in the chat and questions that are being raised. So Helena asks us if she has questions for the panel. Are they aware of the initiative story arcs, and what do they think of it in relation to today's discussion? So Helena, I wasn't aware of it. I've been looking at it, but this is why I think we need to collect information about what's going on in order to understand what's happening to the critical creative interface. And then Catherine's microphone's not working, so I'm going to, Catherine Craig, I'm going to ask your question for you. It's a challenging one, actually. So Catherine says, if you don't mind, Susie, there's one interesting thing about REF criteria. It's the REF criteria rigor, which seems tricky to apply to creative writing. So she's asking us about that. So I think we might want to ponder that. And she also gives the link that I meant to add into the chat about her work on Beyond Criticism.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Kate, you've got your hand up if you'd like to respond to any of those points.
Yeah, it wasn't actually so. There was another question in the chat that I was going to respond to. I think it was someone called Sharon. Maybe they're a secondary school teacher, and she's asked a question about. Well, a student came to ask her about being a writer, but it took them quite a bit of time to pluck up the courage, because people have been telling them doing writing degrees is a waste of time, and it's like, you know, that whole Mickey Mouse degree sort of concept. and she's despondent about the position of creative writing in the curriculum. And I agree with you, Sharon, that grinds my gears massively. And I just wanted to, she asks for some ideas around sort of promoting writing and literary degrees and practice to students in a way that shows that they are viable and exciting propositions. And I just wanted to say something about using writing and literary analysis in a cross-curricular sort of way. Something that's quite exciting that's happened here in the past few years in the Welsh curriculum is a redesign of things. So subjects at primary school level are taught thematically in an interdisciplinary way. So I just wanted to pop the suggestion of using literary and creative practice to investigate, I don't know, maths or physics. I understand that's not very easy in a really rigid system, but yeah, it can be a way to show the usefulness of what it is we do. So that's the one I wanted to answer.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks so much, because I didn't have a chance to see those. And I was really interested in the point about rigor as well. So as a writer, I think that creative writing is an incredibly rigorous process. And I'm really interested in that idea of crossing that over between critical scholarly rigor and creative rigor. Okay,
just quickly, if I can jump in on that point really fast, I promise. Is like another thing that creative writing teaches these students, and this is something you can tell a year 7 student, is like it teaches you to like work on your own really well and come up with your own ideas and think by yourself for yourself, like not just like, but like it's a very self-driven thing. You have to come up with the idea for your story. If you've got an idea for your story, it's a place where you learn how to develop. Like that independence is like a really big thing to sell to a kid.
Yeah, thanks, Douglas. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left, and I did ask some. I know we were trying to cover an enormous amount in a small space of time, but moving to a sort of practical way forward. So obviously we've got the entire universe of REF, and then we've got the entire universe of pedagogy. But it does seem that there, I do agree with everybody that there is a shift and a change in atmosphere in terms of the coming together of these two disciplines that have always been together, actually, but also recognizing all the other things that we've been talking about. So I was wondering if anyone had any very brilliant ideas of how to capture the energy, move forward in an extremely practical and useful way. Bob.
I'm gonna kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So Jenny Richard is running a series called Thinking Forward. Is that right? Yeah, which is about exactly what you're saying, Susie. Thinking about how disciplines kind of develop forward into the future. And I think there would be at least two possible things coming out of this meeting. One would be something about the issues that Frances raised, and you raised too, about rigor and the REF and research. So creative writing and English as practice going forward, and thinking about those changes, the non-fiction writing that Jenny was talking about just now. And the other thing that I would volunteer to be involved in would be to talk about the issues that Doug was raising, which is about pedagogy and things we might do, things that might run together or might run apart, but might be things that we would like to think about in developing the discipline. So I guess that would be a fora for 1 or 2 of those things. I'm just suggesting that out loud, Jenny. I didn't mean to.
I think if I may, Susie, I think that Bob's suggestions just second them might be if there was an appetite just to run. I mean, to think about issues that have come up today, the questions that people have raised. I mean, pedagogy is one, REF rigor is another. But also just to hear about the work that people are doing. I think for me that would be really valuable to have some examples to talk about, so that actually the integration of the critical and creative, which is it just needs to land properly. So it might just be a series of online Zooms that can be recorded, where we're opening up these. I mean, this is a getting to know you, but to do it in collaboration between the EA and Norway, I think that would be a wonderful thing. If people felt that, maybe we should just ask if people would value that.
Any thoughts, particularly Norway colleagues?
Yeah, I think I just speaking as an individual Norway person, I think that sounds really exciting, and I think that it's something that our members would really value, and I expect other people from Norway would be quite excited to be part of it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay. So there's words such as on sort of fora, I heard the word. So perhaps what we will do is, I've put my email up there, and Kate has as well, actually. Thank you, Kate. So Kate, if you don't mind, how about if I suggest that people email you and me, so me from English Association, you from now, if you're comfortable with that, and and we can gather ideas and process them, and then perhaps send out a follow-up. Does that sound okay? In whatever form that will be. I don't want to pin everybody down to a great big conference or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So everyone will start crying. So are you okay with that, Kate?
Yeah, I am. I was looking for something to do.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you've got loads of time. So I think that's what we'll do is moving forward. So if you email Kate and I, and then we'll work together and pull up some kind of follow-up communication, which will involve practical ways forward. Does that sound all right?
It sounds brilliant.
Yeah, great. Okay, I think that's the end. I did promise to finish at 45, so I just want to say a huge thank you. This is kind of the beginning, and hopefully we can keep talking, keep sharing. Feels good. Yeah. Okay, thank you everybody, especially all the speakers, and those of you who didn't get to speak, hopefully feel free to reach out. Okay,
thank you for organising, Susie.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Susie.
As well.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Becky. Bye.
On.